My family kicked me out on my 18th birthday because the check stopped. Now they're homeless and begging me to save them. My 18th birthday, my family gathered to tell me, "You're adopted, and your real parents didn't want you either. Nobody does." Then Mom chuckled. "We only kept you for the monthly checks, which ended today, so you're homeless now." "You'll regret this," I told them. My sister said, "What are you going to do, cry?" So I smiled and left. That was 5 years ago. I had been prepared for years. This morning, they're collapsing, begging, writing, and calling non-stop. "Eli, son, please." So I don't usually post on here, but I've been reading a lot of these story time things lately, and to be honest, I never expected to have something to share that was this crazy. I'm not sure whether this is the correct location, but whatever. I just had to get this out. I'm not searching for advice or sympathy. I'm not sure. Maybe someone will get it. If you think I'm making something up, I understand. I wouldn't believe that either unless it happened to me. Anyway, I am Eli. I'm now 23, but it all began on my 18th birthday. I think I should start with the previous week, because that's when things began to feel odd. My mother, Tamara, kept making bizarre statements about how things are going to change soon, and you'll see what real life is like. She's always been sharp, but this was different. My father, Richard, was hardly present, sitting in the living room browsing through his phone, not even appearing to care. My sister Chloe is a year younger than me and we're not related, but I'll get there by acting as if she won the lotto. Walking around with a pleased expression, whispering to Mom, and then staring at me like I was a bug on the wall. I suspected they were planning a surprise, but not in a nice way. I wasn't anticipating a celebration, but I imagined they'd at least have cake or something. I had been saving for months, doing odd jobs, and had planned to move out after graduation, but I never imagined it would be like this. So my birthday arrives, and it's just the four of us. No friends, no family, and not even a text from my aunt. She is always forgetful, so whatever. Mom prepares the dry chicken and microwaved vegetables, sets the table, and everyone sits down. Nobody says happy birthday. Chloe is on her phone. Dad is just eating as if he isn't there. I try to make small talk, but it's like speaking to a wall. Mom insists on a conversation after dinner. She has this look on her face, as if she is ready to inform me I failed a test or something. She orders Chloe to put down her phone, and Dad finally looks up. I am simply sitting there, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Then she simply states it. "You're adopted. Your real parents didn't want you, nobody does." She speaks it as if she were reading the weather. I just gazed at her because I assumed she was joking. I mean, I've always felt like the odd one out, but I never expected them to express it that way. Then she laughs, but it's not a nice laugh. It's as if she's been waiting years to say something. She claims they simply kept me for the monthly payments, which expire today, leaving me essentially destitute. She thinks it's time for me to figure things out and become a man. Chloe begins to giggle, and Dad simply shrugs as if he has nothing to contribute. I inquire if they are serious, and Mom only rolls her eyes. She thinks I should have seen it coming, that I was always too busy and never quite fit in. Chloe joins in, saying, "What are you going to do, cry?" She gives me this look as if she is defying me to say anything. I just sat there for a moment trying to digest it. I'm not mad at first, just numb, I suppose. Then it hit me. All the times. They made me do things for them. All the times I was accused for anything Chloe did. All the times I was left out of family events. Everything makes sense. I inquire, "Why now? Why like this?" And Mom simply adds, "It's business, not personal." She thinks I should be grateful that they kept me this long. Dad finally speaks up, saying I should pack my belongings and not cause a scene. I stand up, and my chair scratches against the floor. I warn them that they will come to regret this. I'm not even sure why I said that. It simply came out. Chloe laughs, saying I'm overly theatrical. I stare at her, and she simply smirks. I grab my phone and keys, and Mom warns me not to take anything that is not mine. When I inquire what that means, she adds that everything in the house is theirs, not mine. I tell her, "Fine. I don't want any of it." I walk to my room, and Chloe follows me, standing at the doorway as if she is guarding it. She tells me to hurry up since Mom wants to clear out my room for her crafting supplies. I order her to move, but she just stands there, arms crossed. I push past her, and she shoves me back, but I don't mind. I grab my backpack, throw in some clothing, my charger, and my old laptop, and that's all. I don't bother with the others. As I go, Mom stands at the bottom of the steps, arms folded. She says I have 10 minutes to leave or she'll call someone. I tell her I'm leaving, and she just watches me walk out. Dad does not even look up from his phone. Chloe slammed the door behind me. I get into my car. It's a piece of crap, but it runs and then rests for a minute. I check my phone. No messages. Nothing. I start the car and drive away, unsure where I am headed. I landed up in a park where I used to go as a youngster. Simply sit there and attempt to figure out what the hell happened. I've been thinking about all the tiny things over the years, like how Mom was always concerned about money, how she'd become upset if I asked for anything, how Chloe always got new things while I got hand-me-downs, how Dad never spoke to me until he needed something repaired or moved. I always assumed it was just regular family stuff, but now I feel like I'm simply a paycheck to them. I text a few buddies, but it's late and no one responds. I go through my phone, seeking for a place to crash, but I don't want to say what occurred. I end up sleeping in my car with a hoodie pulled over my head, trying not to think about it. The next morning I received an SMS from Mom. She tells me not to come back because I'm on my own now. Chloe sends me a meme about homeless people and adds, "Good luck." I just blocked her. I start to think about what I'll do next. I have some cash saved, not much, but enough to live by for a while. I have my documents, phone and car. I'm not completely screwed, but I'm pissed. I decided right then that I was not going to let them get away with it. I'm not sure how yet, but I'm not going to disappear. They believe they can simply chuck me out and move on. Nah. I've been paying attention for years, and know more about them than they realize. I start building a mental list of everything I know about them, everything they've done, and all I can do to ruin their lives. I'm not proud of it, but I refuse to be the victim here. Do they want to play games? Fine. I can also play. So that's how I spent my 18th birthday. Not quite what I expected, but whatever. I'm far from done with them. If you are still reading, thank you. I will keep you updated if anything changes. I have a plan, and I am just getting started. Update 1. So, sure, I slept in my car the first night, and it was weird. I kept thinking I'd wake up to a nasty dream or something. But it's just me, my backpack, and a half-dead phone. I recall Chloe slamming the door behind me as if she were pleased of it. I kept thinking about how Mom stood there with her arms crossed, like if she was waiting for me to beg. I did not. The following few days were spent hopping around, parking in various locations, and attempting not to be spotted. I went to the 24-hour gym to shower and used the library's Wi-Fi. I didn't want to tell anyone what had happened, including my buddies, since who wants to be that guy? Plus, I knew if I informed anyone, it would spread to my family, and I wasn't prepared for that. Not yet. I noticed small details immediately away, such as how silent my phone was. There were no texts from Mom. No calls from Dad. Just a few memes from Chloe. All of them are about being broke or homeless. She even sent me a screenshot of her new room arrangement, bragging about how much space she now had. I blocked her after that. I suppose I knew she disliked me all along, but it was strange to see it in public. She always wanted to be the only child, and I was just in the way. Mom used to call Chloe her real daughter when she thought I couldn't hear. I suppose that was the goal. I started writing a list in my notes app of everything I recalled about the house, the bills, and how things functioned. I'd been in charge of a lot of the tedious tasks, such as setting up Wi-Fi, mending the network, and dealing with the landlord when the sink broke. Mom used to say I was good for something when she needed me to do something. But now I see it was simply because she didn't want to deal with it herself. Dad never bothered about any of it. He was sitting in the living room, looking through his phone, pretending not to hear when things broke. I had a little money saved, not a lot, but enough to go by for a while. I started looking for inexpensive places to stay, but everything was either too pricey or too sketchy. I ended up sleeping in my car for a while, simply shifting around so no one would notice. I kept thinking about what Mom had said, and how they only kept me for the checks. I began to wonder what they were going to do now that the money was gone. I knew they weren't quite wealthy, and Mom was often grumbling about bills. One day, I returned to the residence to see if they had changed the locks. I parked down the street and watched for a while. Chloe was outdoors, talking with friends and showing off her new room. I could hear her giggling on the sidewalk. I didn't go up. I just watched for a bit and then left. I began to reflect on everything I knew about them, including facts no one else was aware of. I hadn't decided what I was going to do yet, but I knew I wasn't going to disappear. I began reaching out to some people, not friends, such as my Aunt Denise. She's my mother's sister, and we've never gotten along, but she always seemed to care more about me than Mom did. I texted her and said I needed a place to rest for the night. She contacted me soon away and asked what had happened. I told her the basics, simply that Mom kicked me out, and she became very quiet. She claimed she would speak with Mom, but I urged her not to bother. I just needed some place to sleep. She allowed me to stay for the night. But it was weird. Her husband continued wondering. What did I do to get kicked out? Was I on drugs? I merely stated it was a family matter. I left the following morning. After that, I began to think more about what I could do. I knew Mom and Dad were behind on their rent since I had seen the letters from the landlord. I knew they were late on their power bill since I was the one who routinely called to request extensions. I knew Chloe was using my old laptop for school, but she had no idea how to repair it if it broke. I began building a list of everything I could tamper with and how I might make their life more difficult. I was not going to do anything unlawful, but I wasn't going to make things easy for them either. I started by changing the passwords for the Wi-Fi and streaming accounts. Nothing significant, just enough to bother them. I knew Mom would stress out if she couldn't watch her shows, and Chloe would go crazy if she couldn't get online. Mom sent me a number of angry texts questioning what I'd done, but I ignored them. She threatened to contact the police, but I knew she wouldn't. She never wanted anyone to know what was actually going on in her home. I began receiving messages from the landlord, asking if I knew where Mom was. When I told him I no longer lived there, he simply groaned. He threatened to start eviction procedures if they did not pay. I knew Mom would blame me for it, but I didn't mind. She'd always blamed me for their financial troubles, but now she'd have to work it out for herself. I started talking to several of the neighbors casually. They always loved me more than Chloe since I helped them with their Wi-Fi and fixed their bikes. I didn't tell them what happened, but I could tell they were aware of the situation. One of them, an elderly man named Harold, inquired if everything was fine at home. I merely told him I had moved out, and he nodded as if he understood. He said that if I needed anything, I should let him know. I didn't take him up on it, but it was pleasant to hear. I began receiving additional texts from Mom, all of which were angry at first, and then desperate. She accused me of being selfish and pulling the family apart. She said Chloe was suffering in school without my assistance, and Dad was stressed. I simply ignored her. I realized she was just reaching out because she needed something, not because she cared. One night, Dad called me. He never called, so I almost didn't respond. He simply told me they needed me to come home and fix the Wi-Fi because Chloe was failing her classes and Mom was losing it. I informed him I wasn't coming back, and he simply hung up. No goodbyes? Nothing. I began to reflect on all of the times they made me feel as if I didn't belong, as well as the times they blamed me for things that were not my fault. I wasn't about to let them off the hook. I began looking for additional methods to make life difficult for them without crossing any bounds. I knew Mom was hiding money from Dad because I saw her stashing cash in the kitchen. I knew Chloe was using my old accounts for school, so I changed the passwords. I knew Dad was behind on his car payments because he would make me call the bank for him. I began receiving messages from Chloe, all of them angry. She accused me of wrecking her life and being petty. She stated Mom was constantly sobbing and Dad was yelling at everyone. I just blocked her. I didn't care anymore. I started to feel more secure, as if I was finally in control. I wasn't just a youngster they could bully anymore. I began making plans. Real plans, for how I planned to respond to them. I wasn't going to do something stupid, and I wasn't going to let them win. The final straw was when Mom arrived at my aunt's house, beating on the door and demanding to see me. She claimed I was stealing from them and wrecking their lives. My aunt told her to go, and my mother hit her. My aunt slammed the door on her face. After that, I knew I was done with them permanently. I started looking for a place to stay that was inexpensive but not bad. I found a room in a house with several other guys. It wasn't fancy, but it was better than my car. I began working more, saving money, and making plans. I knew it would take time, but I remained patient. I began keeping note of everything, every message, every phone call, and every time they tried to mess with me. I wasn't about to let them forget what they'd done. I began telling folks the truth. Not the entire story, but enough to make them realize Mom and Dad were not the saints they claimed to be. I could see that things were becoming worse at home. Mom began posting on Facebook about how difficult things were, and how ungrateful children might be. Chloe began sharing sorrowful stories of being abandoned by her brother. I just chuckled. They wanted pity, but they were not going to receive it from me. I began to consider all of the ways I could make things more difficult for them while remaining within the confines of the law. I wasn't finished yet. Not even close. So that is where things stand right now. I'm out. I am on my own. And I am not looking back. But I'm far from done with them. The next section is where things really begin to get interesting. Update 2. So I guess this is when things really start to get interesting. Or at least more realistic. I'm not going to claim I had a master plan from the start, but I wasn't sitting around waiting for karma either. I was angry, and I wanted them to feel it. I wanted them to understand what it's like to be powerless, to have everything you rely on simply stop working. And I wanted them to realize it was me. As I already stated, it began with minor incidents. However, after a while, I realized it wasn't enough. Changing passwords and ignoring texts are just noise. They could live with it. I wanted them to experience it in their wallets and daily lives. They made me feel like a burden for many years. I wanted them to have to explain themselves to people who mattered to them, not simply strangers on the internet. The first strange thing that happened was receiving a call from the landlord again. But this time, he sounded angry. He said he'd been trying to reach my mother for weeks and she was avoiding him. He inquired if I knew where she was, and I just responded I didn't reside there anymore. He began ranting about how the rent was months late and how sick he was of the excuses. I could hear him moving papers, like if he was seeking for something to frighten me with, but I simply let him speak. He ultimately stated that he was going to begin the eviction procedure, and I simply answered, "Do what you gotta do, man." I knew Mom would blame me for this, although she was the one who stopped paying. She always pretended to be a financial genius, but she was only excellent at hiding things from Dad and yelling at Chloe until she did what she wanted. Dad never paid attention to anything other than his automobile or phone. I suppose that's why they constantly asked me to perform the tedious tasks, because they couldn't be bothered. I began to reflect on everything I knew about them, including facts no one else was aware of. For example, Mom used to take cash from Chloe's birthday cards, while Dad would borrow money from neighbors and never repay it. I began compiling a list in case I needed it later. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it, but it was nice to have something on them for once. Then I started receiving messages from Chloe, but they weren't the typical memes or insults. She was truly begging for assistance. She claimed her laptop was playing up and she couldn't get her schoolwork to work. She stated that Mom was stressing out because the Wi-Fi was down again and Dad was yelling at everyone. I just left her to read. I figured she'd figure it out or blame me, like she always did. A few days later, I received a call from my Aunt Denise. She claimed Mom had called her crying, saying I had ruined everything and the family was disintegrating. Denise asked if I could simply go over and help them out for once, just to preserve the peace. I told her no, and she became silent. She stated she understood, but I could tell she didn't fully get. She still saw Mom as her older sister, not the lady who kicked her own child out for money. I started hearing from neighbors as well. Harold from down the street messaged me on Facebook, asking if everything was fine at home. He stated he saw Mom ranting at the landlord in the driveway while Dad sat in the car, saying nothing. I just informed him that I no longer lived there, and he expressed regret. He did not ask for specifics, which I appreciated. Then things began to get messy. Mom began posting on Facebook about how difficult things were, how she was working to keep the family together, and how some people simply do not appreciate what they have. She didn't mention my name, but it was evident. Chloe began posting sad stories about being abandoned by her brother, and her friends began emailing me to find out what happened. I simply disregarded them. I began receiving more calls from the landlord and then the energy provider. They were seeking for someone to pay the bills, but I kept telling them I didn't live there anymore. Mom was getting frantic, so she started contacting me at odd hours, imploring me to come home and mend things. She apologized, stated she didn't mean what she said, and that she simply needed help. I didn't respond. One night, I received a call from Dad. He sounded exhausted, like though he hadn't slept in days. He claimed Mom was losing it, Chloe was failing school, and the landlord was threatening to kick them out. He said he needed me to come home and help for a short while. I told him no, and he simply hung up. Then Chloe arrived at my apartment. I was living in a shared house with a few other guys. It wasn't nice, but it was mine. She just showed up one night, beating on the door and demanding that I come out. One of my roommates responded and urged her to leave, but she continued to rant. When I eventually went outside, she started shoving me, saying I was wrecking her life, that Mom was constantly sobbing, and that Dad was a mess. I told her to go, but she hit me. I just stood there. She began crying. My roommate came out and urged her to get lost, and she eventually departed, shutting the gate behind her. After that, I began receiving letters from Mom's friends, people I hardly knew, telling me that I needed to be a man and take care of my family. I just blocked them. I was not going to let them guilt me into cleaning up their mess. I started thinking about all the ways I might make things worse for them without breaking any rules. I knew Mom was hiding money from Dad, so I texted an anonymous tip to Dad's phone, including a screenshot of her stash location. I knew Dad was behind on his car payments, so I wrote a notice to the bank to speed things up. I knew Chloe was using my old accounts for school, so I changed the passwords again simply to mess with her. I started hearing from additional people, such as the neighbors, that things were growing worse at the house. Mom was yelling at everyone, Dad was never home, and Chloe was skipping classes. The landlord eventually showed up with an eviction notice, and Mom lost it. She screamed at me, saying I had ruined her life. I simply hung up. I started to feel better, like I was finally in control. I wasn't just a youngster they could bully anymore. I began planning out what I was going to do next and how I was going to keep the pressure on. I wasn't going to let them off the hook, not after what they had done. The last thing that happened was Mom turning up at work and yelling at me in front of everyone. They accused me of being a terrible son, uncaring and wrecking the family. I just walked away. She attempted to follow me, but security stopped her. She slapped one of the guards and was carried outside. After that, I realized she was desperate. So, that is where things stand right now. They are breaking apart, and they are aware that it is because of me. I'm not finished yet. Not even close. The next section is where everything comes crashing down. Final update. So I awoke this morning to over 20 missed calls and texts. I recognized some of the numerals, while others were unfamiliar. I wondered whether anything had happened to someone. But no. It was just my family blowing up my phone as if it was the end of the world. I browsed through the notifications, and they were all the same thing. Eli, please. Call us. We need you. Son, come home. Then there were a slew of texts from Mom that were just straight paragraphs with no punctuation. Just her talking about how everything is falling apart and how I am the only one who can save everything. I did not even open them at first. Just gazed at the screen, laughing. 5 years ago, they couldn't get rid of me quick enough. They are now acting as if I am the only person left on Earth. The weirdest aspect was discovering a message from Dad. He never texts, ever. His was simply, call me. Please. That is it. No emojis. Nothing. I nearly couldn't believe it was him. Then I spotted a couple from Chloe, and hers were everywhere. She was mad, then begging, and then mad again. She also sent a voice note, which I could not listen to, but I could see the preview, which consisted of her repeatedly shouting my name. I suppose I should back up a little. After everything that happened, I kept my distance. But I never actually stopped paying attention. I'd get information from neighbors, my Aunt Denise, or even random folks who knew my family. It was always the same. Mom was losing it. Dad was never home. Chloe was failing at everything she attempted. I really didn't care. I expected them to figure it out. Or not. But then I started hearing how horrible things were getting. It's as if the landlord eventually booted them out and forced them to move into a little apartment across town. Mom started arguing with everyone, including her own friends. Dad lost his car because he couldn't make payments. Chloe dropped out of school. I did not do any of that directly. But I absolutely did not aid them. And I ensured that they could no longer use me as a crutch. The thing that truly triggered everything was when Mom attempted to obtain money from my aunt. Denise called and asked if I knew what was going on. I just told her the truth. I replied, "Look, they kicked me out. They said I was nothing. And now they expect me to bail them out." Denise simply groaned and stated that she was tired of Mom's drama. She stated she wasn't going to give them anything. And that was all. Mom then started calling everyone she knew in an attempt to get help. However, nobody wanted to deal with her. She burned every bridge she had. And now she was stuck. I started getting messages from individuals I barely knew, such as old neighbors or family acquaintances, wondering if I was all right and if I needed anything. I simply said I was all right. I didn't want to become involved, but it was strange how quickly people turned against my family once they learned what was going on. I suppose everyone knew Mom was a piece of work, but no one wanted to admit it until now. The final straw was when Mom showed up at my house. I was sitting in the living room, scrolling through my phone, when I heard a bang on the door. I peeked through the peephole and saw her standing there, hair a tangle, eyes frantic, hammering on the door as if she was about to break it down. I did not open it. I just stood there watching her. She began yelling, claiming she needed to speak with me, that she was sorry, and that she simply wanted her family back. My roommate walked out and inquired what was going on, and I simply replied, "Don't worry about it. She will leave." Mom kept yelling. Then she began crying. Then she began cursing me out. Finally, she sat down on the steps and rested her head in her hands. I waited about 15 minutes before opening the door and telling her to go. She glanced up at me, eyes burning, and apologized. That she did not intend any of it. That she only needed assistance. I told her, "You made your decision. You kicked me out. You said I was nothing. And now you expect me to mend your mess? Not happening." She attempted to stand up and grab my arm, but I resisted. She slapped me. Hard. And I was just standing there. I did not say anything. She started crying again, stood up, and walked away, shutting the gate behind her. Following that, the calls and texts became increasingly worse. Dad began phoning, leaving voicemail. He said he was sorry, that he simply wants to talk. Chloe texted me a bunch of texts, stating she missed me, apologized for everything, and just wanted her brother back. I did not respond to any of them. I blocked their numbers. I blocked them on everything. I was finished. I started wondering why they treated me the way they did. I suppose it was always about money. Mom never wanted me. She only wanted the checks. Dad simply went along with everything Mom wanted since it was easier than fighting. Chloe despised me because she believed I was diverting attention away from her. It was never about family. It was always about what they could take from me. I left as soon as the money ran out. I know some people will tell me that I should forgive them, or try to make things right. But I do not see the point. They made their decision. They wanted me gone. And now they have what they wanted. I am not going to be their safety net. I am not going to let them utilize me anymore. The weirdest aspect is that I don't feel horrible about it. I believed I would, but I don't. I feel, I do not know. Free, I suppose. Like I'd finally gotten out from under their thumb. I don't have to be concerned about what they think, what they want, or need. I can simply live my life. So that's where things stand right now. My family is coming apart, and they urge me to return. But I am not going. I am done. I'm not sure what's going to happen to them, and I honestly don't care. They made the bed. They can now lie in it. If you are still reading, thank you. I realize this was a lot, but I wanted to get it out. I'm not sure if there's a lesson here or not, but I suppose if there is, it's that you don't owe somebody anything simply because they share your surname. Sometimes family is simply folks who happen to live in the same house. Sometimes it isn't even that. Anyway, I am moving on. I have my own life now. And I am not looking back.